Coming September 1st, Rewind 9/11.
Today, we've had a national tragedy.
An incredible plane crash into the World Trade Center.
A look back at the tragedy of that day.
Another explosion has taken place at the Pentagon.
It became very apparent that what was happening was terrorism.
Fox News presents Rewind 9/11.
The people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Listen on Odyssey.
Joining us now on the North Olmsted Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram hotline, covers the Browns for the Chronicle Telegram, brownszone.com is where you can read all of his work. He's Mr. Scott Petrak. Hello, Scott.
What's going on, fellas?
We're hanging, and we're wondering what players in Berea are hanging and thinking, okay, I'm good, and others are thinking, oh, no, this is going to get ugly. And I think it's might be easier than in the past, Scott, for the Browns, only because I think there are clearly guys now who you know need to be on the football team, as opposed to in the past where it was often, well, we got to keep one of these guys at this spot. Which one should we keep?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I still think there's tough decisions to make. And, you know, we do all these 53-man projections, and the fact is we usually miss a couple surprises, right? And the fact is you don't know what there's going to be. There's usually something comes out of left field. But, you know, I think they're going to wind up losing a couple of guys that are NFL caliber players and that can go and have an impact with other teams. And, you know, that's a good thing for the organizational stability and for the growth. But I do think it makes it tough for Andrew Berry, whether it's trying to trade one of those guys for, you know, a late-round draft pick or depth at a different position. You have guys that you know you can't cut and be able to sign on the practice squad because they're going to be claimed by another team.
Hey, Scott, can you take us behind the curtain? How does this actually work? Do they go into a room and Andrew Berry sits there in front of a chart and everyone makes their pitch or their argument to say, like, I'm sure they probably look at, like, Mike Prefer, special teams coach, and go, all right, Mike, you get one guy. You're going to get, I mean, outside a long snapper and your kickers. Make your argument. Why should we keep who's your best special teams guy that could be on the bubble at wide receiver or at running back? How do you think that works?
Yeah, well, you know, they talk about it every day, right? So it's not like it's
right.
They just show up this morning and they're like, okay, let's, you know, start from square one. You know, so they talk about it every day, where guys stack on the depth chart and how that fits. You know, I don't know if Mike Prefer gets a guy, but I think he gets one or two guys from a selection of players, right? If you got your Dearness Johnsons and your Kadero Hodges, and if you want to throw Demetric Felton into this group of, okay, they're probably going to have their biggest impact on special teams, but they can also cross over as backup players. Maybe Elijah Lee at linebacker, MJ Stewart Jr. at defensive back. Like those types of players, I think Prefer just wants to have a collection of guys that he can count on as core special teamers. And I think, you know, I have no doubt that Andrew Berry will give him enough of those players. I just don't know if Prefer gets to say, okay, one guy, he's only going to do special teams, because I just don't know if that's how it works with 53 guys, and you need the versatility and flexibility. You know, but then Andrew Berry, I think the interesting wrinkle is trying to trade a couple of these guys at the bottom of the roster. I think you have the biggest question is, can we put guys on waivers and they're going to clear and we can sign them back to the practice squad? And I'll talk about Malik McDowell, the defensive tackle. I think 2 weeks ago, Andrew Berry might have felt comfortable saying, hey, we like this guy as a project. We're not sure he's ready to contribute right now. We can get him through the waiver wire to the practice squad. And I think after the last two preseason games, I would not feel comfortable if I were Andrew Berry, which means if you really want him, he better be on your 53, and then that means you got to make a decision somewhere else because that costs somebody else a job.
We were just talking about a couple of the offensive positions when it comes to the roster cuts. Let's get your opinion on this. You're set with Baker and Case Keenum, and I threw out, I think the Browns are as set as maybe in the top 6 teams when it comes to backup quarterbacks. You know, Chicago will have Andy Dalton. There's Flacco or Gardner Minshew in Philly. Maybe Garoppolo, you know, in San Francisco if they go with Trey Lance. Mitch Trubisky and Marcus Mariota, those guys are in great shape. And Case Keenum is a guy who makes the Browns in great shape. Is Laletta a guy that another team would pick up as a backup? I think Andy made a great point when he said, are you going to trust a guy who's really only thrown 5 passes in the NFL as your backup quarterback? Or you can sneak him through, you think, and get him on your practice squad?
Yeah, I think you can sneak him through. I think Andy's got a good point when you talk about experience. The only kind of caveat there is you look at Atlanta last night, and they don't know who their number 2 quarterback's going to be. You know, do they stick with Josh Rosen because they had the injury to A.J. McCarron? Do they stick with Josh Rosen, who just got there? Do they go with Franks, who, you know, I never really heard of, and they could probably get him through to their practice squad if they want? So I think Laletta will make it back on the practice squad. But quarterback is such a difficult position, and organizations are desperate to find a guy that they think they might have something in, that it wouldn't stun me if Laletta wound up somewhere. But he doesn't have great physical skills. He doesn't have the strongest arm. He's not the best athlete. So I'm not sure a team would go out on a limb to bring him in as their number 2.
Scott, we had a really interesting conversation before the show about Davian Davis. Like, he's a guy that's really intrigued me here during preseason, but we know he's got to sit out 2 games because he's on the commissioner's list. Mm-hmm. And I mean, you shouldn't want to be on the commissioner's list, let's be honest. But can that work to their advantage if they wanted to hang on to him? Because if he's not, and correct me if I'm wrong, if you're on that list, you're not on the 53. You're just kind of in limbo for a couple weeks, for 2 weeks while you sit out your suspension, and
right.
Then the Browns might have to make a decision in 3 weeks. So as bad as it is that he's on that commissioner's list, this may work to the Browns' advantage.
Yeah, I think it's just it's splitting hairs. I think it's a suspended list. I think there's a difference between the commissioner and suspended list. But regardless, he's going to be – I think they catch a break because there's no way he makes this roster, in my opinion. They just have too many receivers. So They would have had to cut him today or tomorrow. He would have gone through waivers, and another team would have claimed him, right? I don't have much doubt about that. So they get a 2-week reprieve. They don't have to make a roster move until that Monday of week 3, and then they bring him back, and then they have a decision to make. Well, by then, you have no idea how the roster could look. There could be injuries at receiver. They could need him at receiver. They could have issues at other positions where maybe they have an opening that they can put him on the roster for a week or 2. Maybe when you waive a guy, you know, September, whatever that would be, September 26th or 27th, maybe you waive a guy there and he can sneak through as opposed to, you know, when the cuts are looking and everybody's juggling their roster. So I think it's a big benefit for the Browns. I think they knew that was a likely scenario, and they were so smart as an organization that they figured this would work to their advantage, and I think it definitely will.
How about the running back situation? 3, 4? You have to figure Felton's on the team. So the odd guy out is Dearness Johnson, except to me he's the 3rd best running back on the team and does other things well.
Yeah, I think they keep 4. You know, I thought Felton was on the team before last night. I think the fact that he returned a kickoff for 37 yards and a punt for 11, and he has shown he can break a tackle in that return role, guarantees him a spot, and I think he's going to open the season as your kick returner. Maybe not both, but probably both, which is bad news for Joe Jornatson.
Yeah.
And I think Dearness Johnson, you know, every time you see him, I just like him. He runs hard. He's one of those core special teamers we talked about. I would trust him over Felton as a 3rd down blitz pickup guy, right? Just because he's a little bit bigger. I think he's more physical. Not that Felton can't do it, but I've seen Dearness Johnson do it. So I think you keep all 4. The question then is, do you also keep a fullback? I think they will. You know, when I did the 53, I think there's room for a fullback. I only have 3 tight ends being kept, and then you figure out 1 or 2 on the practice squad that you can call up in an emergency if you need one. But I think all 4 running backs make it, and I don't even think that's much of a choice. I feel pretty confident that all 4 guys will.
All right, you say fullback. Do you have a name to go with that? Because if you think you wanted a 4th tight end, you might be able to throw Johnny Stanton in there too.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a decision, right? Do you go with Stanton and you think he's your hybrid 4th tight end? I would not rule that out. I think they go Janovich because he's such a pure blocker in that fullback role, and I'm not sure Stanton is. Janovich is strictly a fullback. Stanton's got more hybrid ability to him. So I think they go Janovich and say he's our fullback. We also use him a bunch on special teams. I think you can get Stanton to the practice squad. And then if you need to call him up to be your fullback if Janovich gets hurt, or if you need a fourth tight end, I think Stanton on the practice squad works. And I don't know if you need a fourth tight end on your 53 every day. I think you just need a fourth guy because you always have to have three going into a game. So whether it's Stanton on the practice squad or you have a true tight end on the practice squad, Jordan Franks or Kyle Markway, somebody that, if a guy gets banged up on a Sunday, you bring the practice squad guy up the next week, and you have your third tight end that Kevin Stefanski needs because they do enough 2 and 3 tight ends during games that you can't have less than 3.
Wide receivers, Scott, you go in 6. Scott Petrak joining us from the Chronicle Telegram, and that would probably mean Davis is the odd guy out. You keep Kadero Hodge, who I think has been terrific. That seems pretty straightforward, does it not?
It does, and obviously we're counting Felton as a running back, right?
Right.
So then it's 6 and 4. If you wanted to throw Felton in as receivers, then it's 7 and 3, and then it feels more crowded that way. So that's why I think it's easier to count Felton as your running back. I keep Kadero Hodge. I think he has so much value, and obviously on special teams he does. He's the gunner. You can return him if you need to. But also his receiver. I mean, he opened last year as a number 3 receiver. He's a big guy. He can block. We know that the Browns love their receivers to block. Now, he's probably 6th in that receiver rotation. If you just go on offense, right? Odell and Jarvis and Donovan Peoples-Jones and Higgins and Schwartz and then Hodge. But so I can understand the argument, well, if your 6th receiver is not going to really do it, do you need to keep a guy that's mostly a special teamer? I understand that. And if Andrew Berry gets a great trade offer where you can get a 4th defensive end that you like better than the guys you have, or you get a 5th-round draft pick next year, they might figure that's worth giving up to Kadero Hodge because he probably won't play a bunch on offense. I just see what he does, and I see his value, and I know that he could be your 3rd receiver if injuries happened, that I would be hesitant to give him up. And there's no way I cut him. The question is, can you make a trade for him where you get something back that you think has so much value? But I'm just not sure you get anything back that's worth more than he is to your team.
Yeah. Scott, are you expecting them to make a trade before tomorrow, 4 o'clock?
I am. I just feel like they have enough players that other teams want that you can get whatever. A conditional 7th-round pick is more valuable than just waiving a guy, right?
Right.
Because you're going to waive him and somebody's going to claim him. So I think there's, I don't know if it's 3 or 4 guys on the Browns roster, and it's a guy like, maybe a Hodge, maybe an offensive lineman that would go somewhere else and be part of the rotation but would be cut here. Maybe one of those D tackles. The Browns have some depth at D tackle. I think they're going to have to cut a quality player. Maybe they're able to get a 6th or 7th-round draft pick by trading somebody like that.
Scott, last thing. You think Chris Hubbard makes this team? And I say that only I think he makes the team without question. But is he valuable enough that another team might actually come calling and give you something of real substance for him?
Yeah, that's another guy to lump into that, Jeff. There's no doubt about it. I think he makes the team. To me, the Browns aren't ready to say James Hudson III is their swing tackle. And if you're not ready to say that, then Chris Hubbard better be that guy.
Yeah.
And, they showed it on NBC last night, the issues that, Hudson has had, and that's not isolated to last night. He's given up pressures and quarterback hits the first 2 games. Doesn't mean he's not going to turn into a good player. It just means if Jedrick Wills goes down week 1, who do you trust to protect Baker's blind side? And I think Chris Hubbard has a big advantage over James Hudson III. So I think Andrew Berry would have to be blown away to trade Hubbard before the season. And I don't know if another team would value him enough to make an offer that makes Andrew Berry change his mind.
Yeah, he's in a tough spot there because if Chris is a starting offensive lineman for you, you're probably looking for an upgrade, as the Browns were. But if he's a backup offensive lineman, man, you think you really have something.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We saw last night he played on both. He played right tackle and left tackle. That's the first time I've seen him play left tackle in a game in this preseason. He looks like he's back from that, what was a serious knee injury. I talked to him a week ago. And he's just a great guy to have on your team too. And, I think if you're, making a choice, I think that matters, right? He's got the versatility. Everyone in the locker room loves him. He's fought back to be on your team. He took a pay cut a year ago. All that to me says this is a guy worth keeping.
Scott, thank you. It'll be a busy 24 hours and then even after that for you. So good luck.
Thanks, guys.
Scott,
real quick.
Go ahead, Andy.
Sneak one more in there. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, Chase McLaughlin on the team or not? Last question. Yes or no?
Yes, but I don't feel good about that.
Okay. Glad I asked.
Genie, we never could have guessed.
Yeah, right. I just think they like the continuity. I think they like the continuity with long snapper holder, kicker that's been there for months. Don't have the upheaval right before week one. But if he struggles week one, then you make a move. And I don't think they want to do that either. But I just think that's where they are.
Stay tuned. All right, Scott. Thanks, bud.
The COVID-19 pandemic showed us how a microscopic virus could upend our lives. There is so much out there that we need to understand. But for every threat, there are heroes working at the edges of science and policy to protect us. I'm Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, former Detroit Health Director and host of Crooked Media's America Dissected. Every episode, I talk to the doctors, scientists, culture makers, and policy leaders who are working out new ways to protect us against our biggest threats. New episodes of America Dissected every Tuesday. Listen on Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Coming September 1st, Rewind 9/11.
Today, we've had a national tragedy.
An incredible plane crash into the World Trade Center.
A look back at the tragedy of that day.
Another explosion has taken place at the Pentagon.
It became very apparent that what was happening was terrorism.
Fox News presents Rewind 9/11.
The people who knocked these buildings down will hear all of us soon.
Listen on Odyssey,